Okay.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for meeting again. Um, I'm curious about like the social problem that you're researching. If you
Yeah,
can go into detail about it.
yeah. So I specifically, education is a large topic, but I was more interested in the education systems within the urban communities. And so specifically, Baltimore and Southeast DC were some areas I was looking for. They both have kind of similar stats in terms of dropout rates and low literacy rates. And so when I started in my research, that's kind of where I looked at first. There's a lot of models out there trying to fix the literacy rates. And what I found throughout my research is, and my other interviews with stakeholders, is that when you get it, it's ideally if you want to, if you want to decrease the dropout rates and have more kids graduate high school, and even further go on to college, it's ideal to get them around elementary, middle school, and literacy, specifically like proficiency tests, are the best examinations of that. More importantly, throughout my research, I was able to find, like in Baltimore, about one third of their high schools are failing students in third and fourth grade in terms of their proficiency rates in literacy. And then in Baltimore, the last statistic that I read was in 2019, and they had about 30% um, of a dropout rate. So only 70% of their high school students were graduating, right? And so I talked to Dr. Egan about it. I was still like really confused, and I was looking at more models. I'm sure you've heard of some. I don't know if you've heard of Maryland Mentor Corps, but it's
Yeah.
like it's actually a program from like instituted by the University of Maryland, where they pair a college student with an inner city student in one of the PG public schools, and they work on like reading and things like that. I was actually in one called Reading Partners when I had originally attended Towson University. And when I was there, I was in an organization similar. And so I was,
Wait, so all students in Maryland schools can do that program?
yeah. So yeah, it's called Maryland Mentor Corps. The one at University of Maryland, yes, students can do that. I'm volunteering in it this spring, actually.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not really familiar with it. I'm not from Maryland, so I've never heard of that
Oh,
program.
okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think I gave you a lot. Sorry, but that's kind of
No.
where my initial research started, and I'm still honestly in the thick of it. Kind of, I still am trying to create. I didn't want to pick them, though. There are a lot of models. This field is and sector is like very overcrowded. Um, Surprisingly, the literacy and math proficiency rates are still pretty low. And so, though these models are great, it doesn't seem like they're having that big of an impact. So I'm still trying to figure out more about, what areas I want to target. And so through my interviews with some of the stakeholders, I was kind of able to understand more about, you know, for the ability for a student to succeed. There's so much like parts and moving parts that go into it. And so, um, yeah, so I'm still, I when I, sorry, I feel like I'm running around in circles.
No.
I was meeting with my stakeholders. They're, informing me about, confidence is a big part. A lot of these students within these inner cities have teachers and just the system reinforcing that they're not good enough. Dr. Turner, who's a professor at University of Maryland, who I met with, just kind of explained when she was working in Philadelphia, having a so much social service programs, right? But not having AP classes is kind of um, even in some ways a deterrent, right? You have, you know, um, police officers and you have like daycare facilities, and that's great, right? Because unfortunately there are, specific and unique challenges that inner city kids face, but you don't have AP classes, right? Or you don't even have adequate textbooks for these students. So there's a lot to look into.
Yeah, so you interviewed a teacher from Philly, you said?
Yeah, so her name is Dr. Turner, and she's a professor at University of Maryland studying, I want to say, um, No, so I actually interviewed 2 professors. Sorry, that's why I'm getting a little confused. 2
Okay.
professors, Dr. Blazar, which he is a, professor at Maryland as well, and he teaches, like, talks about, like, education policy, and then Dr. Turner is a professor in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Policy, both in the kind of, like, education department. And I was kind of able to learn different things from both, right? So Dr. Blazar, he as a professor at University of Maryland, and he explains more about like equity and how like public school systems are funded. He has he has a wealth of knowledge more in like the DC area, and he explained, like little. So for example, the importance of having teachers that look like their students. Um, you know, more and more. He explained like I'm sure you can vouch for this as well. When you were in school, having that one teacher who like completely changed your experience, and that's the same and even more imperative for kids in these urban communities. And Also, like for example, like the teacher force. A lot of the times, what did he was saying? A lot of the times, like new teachers are often put into really rigorous and difficult situations, like their first year, and they're often moved into like experiences that they're not equipped to handle in some ways. A lot of the times, you need a teacher that's like ideally who has more experience under her belt and or his or her belt, and that's often not the case. Um, and then so that was Dr. Blazar. And then Dr. Turner, who also is a professor at Maryland. Yeah, she was like a career counselor, I believe, in a school in Philadelphia. And she was explaining to me, yeah, of course, definitely the importance of having teachers that look like you, as well as having um, st- uh, teachers that like believe in you, right? And also understanding that I think a lot of the times, and she made a really interesting point that we are holding these kids to like white standards in a lot of ways. A lot of these kids are coming from communities that are facing structural and systemic racism, and so it may be time to kind of change how we view teaching and learning and the curriculum. She said something that kind of stood out to me. A lot of the times students are told to read Shakespeare and of Mice and Men and all these other books, and they were having difficulties. But if it could be any Nicki Minaj or Migos song, they could use amazing literary devices to explain that. And so maybe changing the way we incorporate teaching with the students. That was a really interesting point that she made. And yeah, she also did make the point about you know the amount of social services that exist in these urban communities, yet not enough academic rigor.
So, you think that maybe classrooms for like high schoolers, middle schoolers, and elementary schoolers, you think that like there needs to be a new way of teaching, or you think like it's a little outdated because maybe kids find it uninterested, and then because I understand what you said, I can vouch because I had a young teacher, super chill guy. I was always interested. Like if I had an older guy, I would like tune out. He'd like show me like an old slideshow. So like I completely understand. So I'm just kind of like curious about your solution. Are you so like what kind of like incorporations would you make in like the classrooms? Like would you hire, I guess, more young teachers, try to make a more like interesting class and like update the classroom?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I am still really there's like I mentioned earlier, I feel like there's so much moving parts. Another one of my stakeholder interviews that I got to talk to was this woman. She runs a Catholic all girls school. And I actually used to volunteer with the school when I was in high school. It's called Washington School for Girls. And it's specifically catered to students with, um, who face, who are come from communities of structural racism, kids who are from the Southeast DC area, as well as like PG County, who are on subsidized lunches, that. So I wanted to talk to her more about, it's a Catholic school, so they get a lot of funding. So they're definitely different in terms of public schools and what they can do, because for one, they just have a lot of control. It's not as much like bureaucracy issues, things like that. But I wanted to research more about like her model and see, what stands out, because during my research, I used to think maybe these schools in Baltimore are failing because there's not a lot of funding. Well, if you do the research, it's actually, I believe Baltimore is like the third public school system that receives the most funding, right? They receive a lot of funding. So money is not it. And so, sorry, I'm forgetting your question. Oh yeah. So looking at her model, right? So for example, so the Washington School for Girls is a Catholic school for girls, uh, from grades 3rd through 8th grade. And the school was originally started basically to curb the high school dropout rates. But then she realized, like mentioned earlier in the beginning, that, to curb the dropout rates, you have to start in middle school, but what they were finding was when they started in middle school, the girls were already disengaged. So you really have to start early, right? Around 3rd grade. And so one thing that they do is they emphasize literacy. They have, and that's another thing. Like, these models are great, and that's what Dr. Turner was explaining to me, the professor. But it's not, these, like, for example, I'm a college student and I'm volunteering with a student from one of the PG public school systems. It's great, but I'm not a teacher, right? And so these models are great, but we should have teachers doing the brunt, like the most of the work, right? There shouldn't be outside help coming in. And so that's what she explained to me, which also then made it even more difficult, because I feel like I don't know how I can really help that. But but yeah, so one thing that Washington School for Girls, like I mentioned, the school in DC does, is that they emphasize literacy from like 3rd grade. They also have like literacy coaches in the classrooms along with teachers. I think that would be really helpful. A lot of these kids are already coming from communities possibly that maybe not reinforce like academic rigor. And so having that extra help and professional help, right? Not just like college students, which I'm happy to help, but I don't think that I can really adequately attend to, a child's needs in a way that a like academic professional could. Another thing she says is so another thing I think is really interesting, and I went to an all-girls high school. I didn't really realize the importance of it until I got into college. And this might be really radical, but having single-sex schools, especially for boys, I also was able to interview another head of a school. It's an all-boys Catholic school in DC, and it tends to similar needs as like this the all girls school I was telling you about. It's a single sex school, all boys, and they meet their students holistically, and that's what I think is necessary. So when you were asking me like what would I do, I honestly think that, so for example, his school, they help the parents with job coaching. They give the kids, the school's actually 6 days a week. So it runs from Monday to Saturday, and they don't have summer. They actually, the kids are in school even during the summer. So they really only have a full like month and a half break during the whole year. The school runs, I think it's like 10 and a half months. It sounds really radical and a lot, but one of the head of the school was explaining to me, when you come from communities that face these systemic issues, if you have a lot of free time on your hands, you just have more time to get in trouble, right? And so keeping these boys engaged, giving them something to do, and continuing to foster values throughout not just the week but throughout the weekend, right? And throughout the year, not just that 9 months and then or how much is a typical school year? Like 9 months or about 8 months?
Yeah, like 9 months.
Yeah. And so they kind of go the extra mile and keep them in for longer. So for me, yes, I think there needs to be a lot of work in the classrooms, but I think there needs to be a holistic approach for these urban communities. Now, I don't know, like I said, I think the reason why these schools, like Catholics, are able to flourish so much is because they receive a lot of donations, because having kind of that faith aspect attached to them, people are more willing to give. They kind of have control over what they do with their money. They get a lot of funding, so they just have more kind of control over what they want to do. But I think that's why they're able to work so much, right? They help the students' parents with job coaching. All the kids get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we already know, like, if the kid is not, adequately taken care of, they can't perform well in the classroom, right? And so it's hard because you run a fine line where you don't want to replace the parents, or at the end of the day, the kids are only in the classroom for about 8 hours, right? 8, 9 hours. And then they're with their parents for most of the time, or whoever their like network is. And so that's also important. Dr. Turner mentioned, oh, sorry, it wasn't Dr. Turner. It was Dr. Beth Reeves. She is the woman who runs the all girls school in DC I told you about. She was saying, if you want to get parents more involved, or whoever's in there, because a lot of the times there's this like narrative that parents of these children don't really care about them, or it's not that they don't care about them. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, it might be a single parent household. And so it's not and they're working all day. They don't really have the time, but there's always one person that cares. And that's what she always pointed out. And so one thing that she mentioned was just tweaking, even like, for example, if you want a parent to come to, like some kind of parent event for the kid, or to learn more about like how to best assist their child, like whatever you're hosting as an administrator, don't make it from not like 9 to 11 in the morning. They have work, right? Tweak the times, like maybe 7 to 8, just like those little things that can make it more plausible for a parent to really exist in their child's life. Whereas like they may not be able to if you're a working mother and you have, a school event that you have to go to from 9 to 11. So I'm still trying to figure out, to your answer, that was a long-winded explanation. I'm still trying to figure out more about how I want to shape, my model. But I think that there needs to be a holistic approach from the parent, from the school, reaching all the way to like the household, and identifying those key players in that child's life, because the teachers and the administrators are only a small facet, right? They go back home, and wherever they come from, they're also being influenced there as well.
What are the expenses like? Because you mentioned that they have like programs that help with professional development. Like, I mean, I know in the past that Catholic schools can be expensive, and I feel like you're trying to reach out to like a more broader audience than just like, I don't know, people who could afford it.
Yeah. So one interesting thing I forgot to mention is the two Catholic schools I mentioned earlier. They're actually totally free to the students. The kids don't pay
Oh, really?
anything. Yeah, yeah. So they get that much funding and donations that they don't have to. Right? They have the Catholic school I mentioned, the all boys school in DC. They have about right now a $10 million endowment. So the kids don't pay anything. They from books to textbooks to uniforms, like it's all free.
Really? That's incredible, damn.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's really amazing.
Do you think more schools could be like that, or I guess that's just a huge
I
donation
know,
sort of
right?
thing?
I think and I was talking to Dr. Eakin about it as well. It's like, it's not easy to just everyone to start Catholic school. I wish
Yeah.
everyone could, because it seems like these two schools are really successful. All their students go on to graduate college, right? Like that's amazing. I think I don't. So another topic I had been talking to when I was talking to Dr. Blazer and Dr. Turner, the two professors at Maryland, was about like charter schools, and that's actually a big conversation that's happening right now. I don't know if you've heard about like charter schools, but
No. What are charter schools?
they're different in this. So they're not okay. So they're different in terms of like, I may not be defining this perfectly, but I believe they access public funds for like private use. So for example, like the traditional public school system, like is based off of, like property taxes. So you may want to double check this, but I believe like charter schools in that sense access those same funds but for private use. So they function in some ways as a private school, but whereas like private schools, like it's all private donations and private funding, whereas like and that's why a lot of people actually there's a lot of controversy about charter schools, because they're, like I said, accessing those funds that could be used for public schools, but they're kind of structured in some ways as a private school. Like the
So it's like a blend
yeah,
of both.
yes, but you might want to do some more research on that. But yeah,
Yeah, I'll look into it.
yeah. But sorry, I think you, oh yeah, do I think that they could, so what I'm trying to focus on is like, so for example, like understanding more models that, maybe we can't obviously completely replicate a private school, but understanding kind of key, like, I guess, differences and understanding maybe how we can replicate them into public schools. One thing that the I for- oh yeah, so his name is Mr. Whitaker. He's the head of the all boys school in DC I was mentioning. One thing that they do is they have public speakers come and talk to the kids about once or twice a month from different fields, and they try to emphasize, they try to make sure, whatever field or industry that person's coming from, they look like the children, right? And so they're usually black or brown, and they come in. It's like a speaker series. They take the kids on like field trips and things like that. Try to get them out as much as possible outside of their traditional communities, and I think that's something that could be a game changer. A lot of the times, these kids don't really have an idea of what they want because they don't see it. Dr. Turner was mentioning that parents don't realize, but a lot of the times, and it's really unfortunate, the public school system is not teaching their kids to, in a lot of these like really poor communities like Baltimore, like Detroit, like Chicago, like they're not teaching. They're a lot of the times the kids are like these are. I'm pretty sure these are somewhat her words verbatim. The system's almost teaching them like to just graduate and work at Chick-fil-A, right? Like they're not learning much more like skills and things that are actually going to be helpful for them to go on to acquire any kind of additional degree or even a a career. And so that goes back to my earlier point, like we were talking about, like changing the classrooms. And that's like a big nationwide conversation right now. A lot of people are talking about like the curriculum. I don't really know how that would work, right? Because like I know when I was in high school, I mean, I went to Catholic school, so like I said, it was totally different. They were in charge of the curriculum, but for the most part, like I know there's like those staple books that like kids have to read, um, like I don't know if you got to read Mice and Men, but like they're like or
Yeah, I read Mice and Men, like Beowulf,
yeah,
some
like there's those.
Shakespeare, Romeo, Juliet.
Exactly. It's actually really sad. Like I'm forgetting the name of the school, but when I was doing my research, there was a public school in Baltimore, and they weren't even reading Shakespeare. A lot of the times, these kids aren't. And like she mentioned, Dr. Turner mentioned, there's not AP classes in their schools, and so I would imagine if you want to change the curriculum, it would be like a higher process to this because I mean all public school systems kind of work the same for that. And I think, and then when I was talking to um, Dr. Beth Reeves, who works with the all girls school in DC, that's what she was mentioning, because it is a private school and they have so much control over what they want to do with their students and the curriculum, that almost is like a bonus for them. And unfortunately, there's no way to change the bureaucracy that is surrounded around public schools, but to work kind of through it. And so that's where I'm at. But yeah, so the speaker series is one thing I've been looking into. I come from an all girls school, high school, and they really emphasized like confidence. And it's interesting. They also had a big emphasis on literacy. Like I came to college and like compared to my counterparts, like my friends, they had trouble like writing essays and like citing and everything. Where I was doing that like my sophomore year in high school, and I didn't even realize. Like I remember in high school, always like just thinking, "Oh, this is so extra," like whatever. But it really proved to be helpful when I got to college. I never failed a paper. I got A's on all my papers. So the importance of because kids also in Baltimore and DC are also um, there's not they're also not proving to be proficient in math. And I was talking to Dr. Egan, and there are programs for that, but one thing I didn't realize is literacy. I don't want to say literacy is more important, but it proves to be more like consequential than like any other subject. And so, um, yeah, maybe having like extra coaches in the classrooms and for after school programs, maybe rather than um, college students. I think the reason why the college student model works so much is because it can be replicated anywhere, right? Um, but if it's not really having an impact on the rates like throughout like the decades, I don't see if it's that helpful then, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sorry, that was a lot.
No, that was good. I really enjoyed hearing about your models.
Thank you, thank you. So I wanted to ask you, do you have an idea of like what you want to do yet?
Yeah, so I'm trying to close the gap, like probably I'm trying to like increase the equity, so make it more fair for low income students. And I want to like increase the retention rate, encourage them to go to community colleges and stuff.
Okay.
And so I interviewed a professor at Maryland, Dr. Carney, and she came up. She was also she researched the inequality in like income and like wanted to help. So she did like a bunch of research and like worked with like multiple community colleges on increase having like this service for students that like specifically help them and geared some towards help them like through their academic career, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Wait, so you want to close the you're working on more like getting students into community college like that kind of.
Yeah, like I want to help low income students because they can't even like think about like 4-year institutions. So like I was like, all right, what's the next step? Community college.
Yeah.
That is cheap, efficient. Like it'll get you like towards your like you'll be on the same path as everyone. So like that would like
Yeah.
close the equity gap. So I was like, all right. So then I interviewed Dr. Carney. She specified in community college, which exactly what I needed. She told me that like she had looked up these services. She came with like this program where they like did like these services that like they were on top of the students. They like helped them, like encouraged them. Probably like it kind of intertwines with what you said, like give them confidence, like make sure they're on track, give them career advice, make sure they're ready to go.
Yeah. No, that sounds really interesting. Do you have it like so do you have is so that's your kind of like that's what you do so because I believe the assignment's due on Friday. So do you have like your model set up and everything? Like or is it do you want to just kind of mirror something that the professor you met with did is or
Yeah, so when I was doing my research, I found that a lot of schools do something similar where they have like a program that just like offers these services, like these exclusive services that just help like students, whether it be like financially or academically. And so I think I'm gonna like sort of mirror and like use a similar model to what Dr. Carney said and like probably combine it with some other stuff I found because I was able to find a lot of stuff when I did the research because it's just a huge problem
yeah.
globally.
Oh,
Yeah. Um, by any chance, is there anyone else you think that would I could interview that
oh,
would
yeah.
be
Yeah, for sure. I'd love
expert in
to
this
yeah.
topic?
I can email you the references. Like, okay, so I don't know if you haven't talked to Dr. Blazar or Dr. Turner, have you?
No, I haven't.
Great. So I will forward their emails to you. They're both professors at University of Maryland, and they work with an education policy, and so I think that'll be really helpful. I think they have definitely more information that I could give you, and a wide kind of range of knowledge of the situation. They're actually like working in it, so definitely those two people. Um, hmm, I think that's all. I'm, I'm trying to think. Um, the Maryland Mentor Corps. Well, so I know you're working in mostly like the college, um,
Yeah.
yeah, the areas. I don't know if that'd be really interesting to you, like the kind of the manager who runs that because it's catered towards like middle school students. So I think those two people would be really good for you, and I'll make sure to forward their references and everything to you.
Okay, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for coming on and doing this interview with me.
yeah, no problem. Okay, yeah. So
All right.
want me to stop recording?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Wait. Do you just press end? Oh wait, no.
Maybe just click record again.
It's weird because I've done this before. Oh, okay, wait.